As a photographer, I've always been fascinated by time-lapse photography, the ability to capture the passage of time in a single image. But my latest project revealed something I was never meant to see, something that has made me question the very nature of reality. It started as a simple experiment. I set up my camera in my backyard, programmed to take one photo every hour for a full year. I wanted to capture the changing seasons, the growth of plants, and the shifting shadows. When the year was up, I eagerly compiled the images into a video. At first, everything looked normal, the expected cycle of day and night, leaves budding and falling, snow coming and going. But as I watched closely, I noticed something odd in the background. A figure, barely visible, seemed to be moving through my yard. Not in the normal way it would appear in one frame, then be in a completely different position in the next, as if teleporting. Its movements were erratic, impossible. Trepidation and unease gripped me as I slowed down the video, examining each frame individually. That's when I saw them, dozens of figures, each visible for only a single frame, moving in ways that defied physics and logic. Some seemed to be floating above the ground, others were distorted, stretched into impossible shapes. And their faces, when I could make them out, their faces were wrong. Too many eyes, mouths where they shouldn't be, features that shifted and changed, even within the split second they were visible. Thinking it must be a glitch in my camera, I set up another time lapse, this time for just a week. The results were the same, more figures, more impossible movements. And this time I noticed something even more terrifying. They were getting closer to my house with each frame. I became obsessed, setting up cameras all over my property, capturing every angle. With each new set of images, the truth became clearer and more horrifying. These things, whatever they were, existed in the spaces between moments. They moved through time in ways we couldn't perceive, visible only when captured in the rigid framework of a time lapse. But they were aware of the cameras, aware of me, and they were curious. In the latest set of images, one of the figures is clearly looking directly at the camera. Its face is a twisted mass of features, but its intent is clear. It knows it's been seen. I'm writing this now as a warning. I've destroyed all my cameras, all the images, but I fear it's too late. I've drawn their attention, and now I can feel them watching me, not just in the photos, but in real time. Glimpses of twisted shapes in my peripheral vision, the sensation of being touched by something that disappears when I turn to look. If you're reading this, be careful what you capture in your photographs. Some things aren't meant to be seen. Some things exist in the gaps between seconds, between the ticks of the clock. And once you see them, they see you. Time isn't what we think it is. It's not a smooth flow, but a series of discrete moments. And in between those moments, that's where they live. That's where they wait. I can hear something moving in the house. Now its movement's jerky and unnatural. I think my time is up. Remember, not all photographs capture memories. Some capture things that should have remained hidden. And sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones that can only be seen when you slow down time itself. Don't look too closely at your time-lapse photos. You never know what might be looking back. When I inherited my grandmother's Victorian mansion, I thought I'd hit the jackpot, a beautiful historic home in a prime location. What more could I ask for? But as the days passed, I realized that this house was far from normal. It was alive, and it was evolving. At first, the changes were subtle. A door that I could have sworn was on the left side of a room would be on the right. The pattern of the wallpaper would shift slightly overnight. I dismissed these as tricks of memory, the disorientation of living in a new place. But then the changes became more drastic. I'd wake up to find entire rooms rearranged, Furniture moved to impossible positions. The basement stairs would lead to the attic one day and to a room I'd never seen before the next. I tried to document the changes to prove to myself I wasn't going crazy, but photographs would change as I watched, the images shifting to match the house's new configuration. Video cameras would mysteriously stop working or show nothing but static. As the weeks passed, the house's evolution accelerated. Rooms would grow or shrink while I watched. Walls would ripple like water, sprouting new doors or windows. The very architecture of the place seemed fluid, changing on a whim. And through it all, I could feel the house watching me. The eyes in the portraits would follow me around the room. The floorboards would creak in response to my thoughts. It was studying me, learning from me. I realized too late what was happening. The house wasn't just changing, it was adapting to me, to my needs, my fears, my subconscious desires. It was becoming a physical manifestation of my psyche. When I was hungry, the kitchen would expand, filling with my favorite foods. When I was tired, cozy nooks with comfortable beds would appear, but it also responded to my darker thoughts. The time I idly wished my noisy neighbor would disappear, I heard a scream from next door and saw a new wall rapidly growing to absorb their house. I tried to leave, but the house wouldn't let me. Doors would lead back inside, windows would show impossible landscapes. Even when I managed to step outside, I'd find myself back in the entrance hall within moments. Now I'm trapped in an ever-changing labyrinth of my own making. The house has become a twisted reflection of my mind, growing more bizarre and nightmarish with each passing day. Rooms filled with my deepest fears alternate with chambers manifesting my wildest dreams. I'm writing this as a warning. Be careful what you inherit. Some legacies are better left unclaimed. And remember, not all houses are built with bricks and mortar. Some are built with dreams and nightmares, and those are the most dangerous of all. The walls are shifting again. I think the house is hungry. It's no longer content with just changing, it wants to grow, to spread. I fear that soon it will expand beyond these grounds, consuming the neighborhood, the city, perhaps even the world. And it's all my fault. Every stray thought, every fleeting emotion feeds its evolution. I've become a prisoner in a cage of my own mind, given physical form by this impossible architecture. If you ever find yourself in a house that seems to change when you're not looking, run. Run before it's too late, before the house gets into your head, and you become just another room in its endless twisted corridors. Remember, home isn't always where the heart is. Sometimes it's where your darkest thoughts come to life, brick by brick, nightmare by nightmare. The door to my room is disappearing now. I think this is the house's way of telling me it's time to become a permanent part of its structure. I'm sorry for what I've unleashed. I'm sorry for what I'm about to become. I never gave much thought to the old man who ran the antique shop down the street. He was just a fixture of the neighborhood, always there with a gentle smile and a shop full of curiosities. That is, until the day I sold him my memories. It started innocently enough. I was short on rent and looking to sell some old jewelry. The sign in his window caught my eye, "We buy memories." Best prices paid. I thought it was just a quirky slogan. When I entered the shop, the old man greeted me with that familiar smile. "What would you like to sell today?" he asked. "Just this old necklace," I replied, placing it on the counter. He examined it closely, then looked up at me with twinkling eyes. "This necklace holds a special memory for you, doesn't it? Your first kiss, perhaps." I was stunned. He was right, but how could he possibly know that? "I'll give you $50 for the necklace," he said, "or $500 for the memory attached to it." I laughed, thinking it was a joke, but the old man was serious. He explained that he was a memory collector, able to extract and preserve people's memories in physical objects. The process was painless, he assured me, and I'd still retain a vague recollection of the event. Desperate for money and intrigued by the concept, I agreed. The old man placed his hand on my forehead, and I felt a strange tingling sensation. When he removed his hand, he was holding a small glowing orb, my memory, extracted and condensed. The effects were immediate. I could still remember my first kiss, but it was hazy, like a dream half forgotten upon waking. The emotional impact, the vivid details, they were gone. Flushed with cash and fascinated by the experience, I returned to the shop again and again. I sold memories of childhood birthdays, trivial arguments, books I'd read. Each time my mind felt lighter, unburdened. But as the weeks passed, I began to notice changes in myself. My personality seemed to be shifting. Without the memory of that argument with my best friend, I couldn't understand why we'd grown apart. Without the recollection of my favorite books, I lost my passion for literature. I was becoming a blank slate, a person without a past. And yet, I couldn't stop. The allure of easy money and the addicting sensation of unburdening myself proved too strong. It wasn't until I considered selling the memory of my mother's funeral that I realized how far I'd gone. I rushed to the shop, demanding the old man return my memories, but he just smiled that gentle smile. "I'm sorry," he said, "but memories once sold cannot be returned. They've been added to the collective." That's when I saw them, hundreds of glowing orbs floating in the back of the shop, each one a memory, a piece of someone's life. And as I watched, I could swear I saw faces in those orbs, expressions of joy, sadness, anger, the full spectrum of human experience trapped in glass. I ran from the shop, but it was too late. I'd sold too much of myself. Now I wander the streets, a shell of my former self, unable to form lasting connections, or even understand who I truly am. I'm writing this as a warning: your memories, even the painful ones, are what make you who you are. They're not commodities to be bought and sold, because once they're gone, you might find that what's left isn't really you at all. The old man's shop is still there, still buying memories. And sometimes late at night, I swear I can hear whispers coming from inside, a collective murmur of countless stolen moments, crying out to be remembered. Remember, the most valuable things you possess aren't in your wallet or your home, they're in your mind. Guard them carefully, for there are those who would collect them, leaving you with nothing but a handful of cash and a head full of emptiness. The old man caught my eye as I passed the shop today. He smiled and waved as if we were old friends. And for a moment I almost smiled back, almost went inside. Old habits die hard, I suppose, even when you can't remember why you formed them in the first place. As a radio enthusiast, I've always been fascinated by the mysterious signals that sometimes drift through the airwaves' number stations. Unexplained broadcasts, the occasional burst of static that almost sounds like voices. But nothing could have prepared me for what I discovered on that fateful night. It was well past midnight, and I was idly scanning through frequencies, more out of habit than any real expectation of finding something interesting. Suddenly, my radio crackled to life with a clarity I'd never experienced before. A voice, low and urgent, began to speak. This is an emergency broadcast. For those who remember, the veil is thinning. They are coming through. Prepare yourselves. I sat up, instantly alert. This wasn't like any emergency broadcast I'd ever heard. The voice continued, rattling off a series of coordinates and what sounded like coded instructions. I scrambled for a pen, jotting down everything I could. As I listened, I felt a strange sensation wash over me, memories I didn't know I had began to surface. I saw flashes of places I'd never been, people I'd never met, all tinged with an overwhelming sense of dread. The broadcast lasted for exactly 17 minutes before cutting off abruptly. In its wake, I was left with a notebook full of scribbled notes and a head full of impossible memories. Over the next few days, I became obsessed with decoding the message. The coordinates led to seemingly random locations across the globe. The coded instructions, when deciphered, spoke of ancient rituals and eldritch entities. I tried to share my findings online, but my posts would mysteriously disappear. Emails I sent bounced back. It was as if something was actively suppressing the information. Then the dream started. Every night I found myself in alien landscapes, watching as monstrous shapes clawed their way through tears and reality. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, the walls of my room seeming to pulse and breathe in the darkness. A week after the broadcast, I noticed them for the first time, people who looked human at first glance, but whose movements were just a little too fluid, whose smiles were a little too wide. They were everywhere, on the street, in shops, on television. Once I started seeing them, I couldn't stop. I tried to find others who had heard the broadcast, but it seemed I was alone, or at least I was the only one willing to talk about it. Those I pressed too hard would suddenly change their faces, morphing into those too wide smiles before they walked away. As the days passed, the world around me began to change in subtle ways. Colors seemed slightly off, shadows moved when they shouldn't, and always there was the feeling of something vast and hungry pressing against the edges of reality. I'm writing this now as a warning and a plea. If you're reading this, it means I've managed to slip it past whatever force is suppressing the truth. Listen for the forgotten frequency --11.827 megahertz. It broadcasts every 17 days at exactly 3:33 a.m., but be warned, once you hear it, you can't unhear it. Once you know, you can't unknow. And they'll know that you know. I can hear them outside my door now, their movements no longer even pretending to be human. I don't know what will happen when they get in, but I know I won't be me anymore. Remember the frequency. Remember the warning. And if you start seeing them, the ones with the too wide smiles and the too fluid movements, run. Run and don't look back, because the veil is thinning, and what waits on the other side is hungry for our world. The forgotten frequency was our last warning. I only hope it's not too late.